All right, let's continue with our Dave Todd scenarios. In scenario number 4, Dave is kind of showing off his gun to Todd, treating the gun really carelessly, not handling it the way that you're supposed to handle firearms. He's doing this in part because he thinks the gun is unloaded and therefore poses no risk to himself or to Todd. But Dave's wrong. It is loaded, and because he's handling it carelessly, he accidentally shoots and kills Todd. And so the question is, all right, is Dave morally responsible? And with this situation, we're going to start to get pretty wide agreement that Dave bears some amount of moral responsibility for what he's done. Even though he didn't intend to do what he did, he was behaving irresponsibly with the gun, right? He sort of broke the first rule of firearms, which is it's always loaded, right? In other words, you always treat a firearm as if it's loaded for exactly the reasons that unfolded here in this scenario. So we know that Dave engaged in some amount of irresponsibility in handling the firearm, and there was a tragic consequence that resulted from this. Now, we're probably not going to hold Dave responsible in the same way that we would if he had intentionally killed Todd or plotted to kill Todd. But we're not going to let Dave off the hook in this case like we would when he had his undiagnosed brain tumor or maybe even his PTSD or hypnosis. We're going to want to hold Dave to some amount of account here. We're going to crinkle our noses at Dave in some amount of disgust. Like, you jerk. I can't believe you took on the power that a firearm gives you and you didn't accept the responsibility that comes along with that. And because of your negligence and stupidity, Todd's now dead. And we're going to assign blame like this on Dave for Todd's death in ways that we probably didn't when we were talking about the undiagnosed brain tumor. So here you can see the degree of moral responsibility is changing because of the conditions in which this action took place. So you're going to be holding Dave to some amount of responsibility. Now, what that level is going to vary. Do we think that Dave deserves to be punished in terms of, like, you're getting removed from society for a while, dude. You're going to jail. Or do we think Dave owes Todd's family something? Like, Dave has to take care of, Todd's family because Todd was the main supporter of his family. Now Dave has to assume that responsibility because he's responsible for Todd no longer being able to do that. Is that the kind of responsibility that we assign to him? Do we put his, picture in the paper and say, bad Dave, don't let Dave have no guns, they're not his friend. Now, situation number 5 gets really complicated for a variety of reasons. Okay, this is a situation where Dave goes to a bar, gets totally hammered, and he gets into this argument with Todd, who's also hammered. And Todd has this ability to really throw down the biting one-liners and just really get on Dave's nerves, just knows exactly what sort of scabs to pick at on Dave to get Dave just really going and angry. And in fact, it works. And Dave goes to his car and he grabs his gun and he comes back and he's so pissed off and he shoots and kills Todd and kills him. But then the next day he has no memory of this. Okay? So now this is a complicated scenario. So the first question would be does the moral responsibility switch go on for you in this one? In other words, do you think that Dave bears some amount of moral responsibility for what he's done? And most people are going to say, yeah. But what's he morally responsible for? Okay, so there's a couple of things here. We would initially say, well, Dave meant to kill Todd. He deliberately went out to his car, grabbed his gun, and then went back in and shot Todd. And all of that shows that Dave meant to do this. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't the result of carelessness. This is something that Dave meant to do. But then we'd say, yeah, but Dave was tanked. He wasn't even in control of his thoughts at this point. He was super hammered. And therefore his ability to make decisions was highly compromised. It would almost be like the psychiatrist scenario earlier. It's like the alcohol sort of takes control of Dave's ability to make decisions for himself in a way that he ordinarily would. Do we cut Dave any slack because he was in this compromised condition when he took this action to shoot Todd? And you may be thinking to yourself, well, Dave chose to get drunk. He didn't have to get drunk. He chose to do that. Okay, so he put himself in this situation where he lost the ability to control himself, and he shouldn't have done that. And we say, yeah, that's true. He did choose to drink. Did he choose to get drunk? And this is where it starts to get foggy again, because not that any of you have ever been drunk, it's certainly never me, but I've heard that there is this point where it's just that one sip too many, right? You think, hey, I'm just going to have 3 beers. And then you start in on that 4th beer, and it's like you're 3 sips in, and suddenly you forget about that commitment to only have 3 beers, and it's like, yeah, what the heck? And your ability to make wise decisions deteriorates the more you drink. And of course, as your inability to make wise decisions deteriorates, you start to drink more, right? And it becomes this kind of aggressively self-perpetuating cycle. It's why people end up vomiting or passing out. It's like, I don't know that many people set out to say, like, you know what, I'm going to drink myself sick tonight. Maybe some people do. But there's this point at which we start to lose control of our ability to even moderate something like how many drinks you're going to continue to have. And again, I know as college students you haven't encountered this yet, but someday you might. And so then the question is, well, Dave initially started drinking, but at some point he lost the ability to moderate his drinking. So does that influence at all our ability to hold him morally responsible for getting drunk and then for shooting Todd? And then the last factor I think that makes this really difficult, we won't even get into Todd being verbally abusive, because hopefully that doesn't weigh in too heavily into our decision, right? That somebody who's saying things that you find offensive deserves to be shot. It would weigh into this equation. But the fact that Dave doesn't remember what he's done, he has no memory. So think about it this way. Let's say you show up to, let's say we were having a face-to-face class, and you show up to class, and we look and we're just aghast. It's like, oh my God, you're here? And we're all surprised because we all saw on the morning news you shooting and killing somebody at a gas station the night before. It's clear as day. It is you. You shot and murdered somebody. And you're looking at us and saying, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. And you genuinely don't. And we even show you the news story, and it's you, and you're like, it's not me. That can't be me. I have no memory of that whatsoever. Would it be right for us to hold you morally responsible at that point? Because that's the point. That's the situation that Dave's in. He has no memory of what happened. And so what would it even mean to hold him morally accountable? Would holding him morally accountable have any impact on him? He'd be like, I don't have this memory of what you guys say I did. It's just what you say. And maybe I really did do it. I just don't remember. Does that factor in at all in our decision? All right. So we'll do the next 2 in the next video.